So I've got Marcus and I on here. Obviously, you don't need to see the slides on the far left, but one of the things that we've been communicating to prospects and to customers is basically, how thank you for the host, by the way, Forest Runner, I appreciate that. But basically, how do we look at the strategy that differentiates the Microsoft platform from other platforms that are out there? What is Microsoft telling us as partners, and then what are we talking to our customers and prospects about? And I think the big thing with this is what we would classify as kind of our key differentiators that we have right now. So the first is the common data model and the common data service, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. From a customer perspective, I can understand, and even internally at our organization, it's been confusing. It's been, Marcus, it's been painful, right, to go through this, to educate people on it. So let's talk a little bit about that on stream. I think that will help educate you a little bit more on that, and then how that can be used with Power Platform, with Dynamics 365, and then also with machine learning as we go through it. But kind of the common thing that we're hearing, and I know we've got some team members from Stoneridge on here too. This is the beautiful part of Confab, is that we can relate kind of what we're hearing from a customer perspective at the front end of this, and then also as customers, obviously you can hear what other people are saying, and maybe the same business challenges that you have that we can help you with. But what we're seeing from customers is they're coming from basically what we call monolithic environments. That's become our new fun word.
I had to go look it up just to make sure I was using it correctly.
Me too. Adam Hallbeck, who's not with us here today, but will be hopefully not next week, but the following week. Basically, they're segmented environments, right? They're stand-up, they're singular environments that are not really integrated with other applications. And I look at, I've been in here now for almost 19 years. When we first started with this, you developed everything inside of that environment. You bought an ERP system, and anything that was a business process was either handled in spreadsheets externally, or it was built inside of Business Central as an app that you created, right? And GP, we did the same thing with, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in custom development, it was a tool specific to that system. Oftentimes, you had to spend a tremendous amount of time learning that very system-specific tool.
Yeah, and that's frustrating, right? I mean, because there are some other tools that are better out there to tackle it, but you can't use them, because then what happens is the cost of integrating that is just sky high, and it's just like, why do we do this? So, and then the other aspect that we're hearing from customers is that they're coming from some hardware configurations, and IT wise they don't really want to focus on IT. Basically, they want to focus on the strategy of the future, and they don't want to maintain hardware. Now, this isn't always the case, right? I don't want to blanket this. This is just something that we're hearing. But then also the poor strategic reporting. I mean, that is absolutely the biggest thing I've heard from almost any prospect. And it's kind of scary from an ERP point of view. Like, let's be truthful about this. We've got reports. We've got hundreds of reports, but every company wants the report just slightly different. It's not like you've got a standardized way, other than maybe like for finance, like balance sheet and income statement, but even your accounts are different, or even the segments that you drill into are different. And so when people come up to us and they're like, well, we want better reporting visibility with it, it's like, well, what do you really mean by that? That's such a loaded question. I know, Marcus, you get that as well quite often, don't you?
Yeah, you even take a customer aging, for example, and you'd think, oh, that's very standard.
30, 60, 90, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just not, because people want other things on there. Actually, just this last week had a request that they wanted to swap out and reflect a cash discount within the AR aging. Not just what's due, but what's due net of a discount.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there's differences. And what do we do? Do we customize something to do that? How do we report off of that? And what we're coming to the conclusion of more and more as we go through this, and we'll talk about this, is that we've really got to start rethinking how we enable customers, or how we give them the right tools to be able to make these changes to existing reports that are out there that don't require development expertise to really drive it, or how to make it so that that business process can run more efficiently, that they can do. And there's a lot of pushback in the industry in large with this at this point, because a lot of people are just like, well, customers just don't know what they don't know. And I think what we're seeing is that customers are becoming smarter and smarter at this, and they're understanding more and more. And even Satya, on the couple things that we've done some analysis on, the Ignite keynote and the Inspire keynote, I mean, where he said IT is the largest grower inside of companies that are not IT centric. right?
Yeah,
So
that was
there's
amazing.
yeah, it's like it's huge. So it's a
Yep.
huge upbringing of this knowledge pool that's going into these individual businesses so that they want to now be able to make code and make changes and things of that nature to support the business. And so a lot of them come down to problem statements. That's what we've talked about as well. And if you're a prospect that's out there or a customer, I mean, some of these are gonna resonate with you. One of them is you can't get support from your vendor because you're version locked, right? Because you've customized it too much, or there is more of an expectation to interact with the data quickly because you want some of that reporting, or you find out that IT is always developing all the reports and it's a lot of effort to do that. I mean, these are like 6. I mean, Marcus, you've heard tons of others as well throughout this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or integrations, or you've got business processes that are changing faster than what the software can adapt to deal with.
Yeah, it just keeps on going and going, and I think that's what we're trying to tackle as an organization, very specifically, is we're trying to understand what that future is, and this is really the future of what Microsoft is communicating to us as partners. Meaning, when we do that analysis of Inspire, there's another slide that I need to get a hold of, Marcus. It's got Satya actually has it, so it's like pulsing and doing really cool
Oh yeah, that's
things
cool.
with it.
Yeah.
But
Big circle.
exactly. But the core of it is the empowerment, meaning
Yes.
empower employees, engaging customers, optimizing operations, and transforming product is what we use these tools to really drive inside of an organization. So it's not that we don't sell ERP now to address accounts payable. We don't sell it to address finance. We don't sell it to even address manufacturing in a lot of ways. Discrete manufacturing and process manufacturing are pretty Bond had it. I mean, older systems had these capabilities. What we're
Right.
trying to get to, though, is how do we make it so that employees can get to that information now, so that you can make decisions off of that information. And the core concept here is all about data. It's everything about data. It's the input of data. It's how data is transitioned in a process flow. It's how data is reported off of. Everything that Microsoft is doing right now around business systems, and basically their entire cloud platform, is really centered around data flow. Power Apps for the input or ease of input of data, Power BI for the reporting of data, right? I mean, it's just Azure ML for machine learning off of data. I mean, it's all data is what you could say to each of those, right, Marcus?
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, much less about the business application.
Yep. It makes sense. Like, data is like gold. It's more gold than you could ever imagine, Sabrina. It is the next, like, it's the commodity, right? It's like water. Eventually, at some points, we're going to be paying even more for water, but that's a different story. Let's focus on data. So, what's the big idea that Microsoft has had, obviously? And that is, why are we continuing to sell things as separate applications that you then develop all this experience around in that application, and then they're monolithic, they're separated? Why do we do that? Why isn't the data just shared? Meaning, why isn't there a central place to put this data so that if you create a customer, for example, in one system, that it will actually create a like gold? What it will put in another one. It's hard to stay on track with chat with it, guys. It's awesome, I love it, but you'll see me laugh and giggle every now and then. That's because chat, all of a sudden, Marcus has something really cool to say. So then the other thing on here obviously is going to be what technologies do we use to really redo that? Why do we have to use different technologies to integrate these types of concepts with it? And that's where the common data model came from. Absolutely, Austin Powers is one of the best shows ever. So, but the common data model, let's talk about that just at a really high level to start. So you've got 6 different applications that need customer data. All of those applications need a unique key or a number field, right? A customer number. They need a name. They need addresses. We can just start there. I think all of us across every system, like Marcus, looking at you, business system wise, right? You need those for setting up a customer inside of Business Central, right?
Yep, absolutely.
I need that in finance and supply chain management. We need that in CE as part of that, right? So those are all areas that we can say those are basic fields that we need. That's what the common data model is. It's the definition of what are the common fields or common model elements that are needed then to be able to store data in a centralized fashion. It's not the database. It's just
Yep.
the definition of the database. And so that's the old school way of thinking about it. The common data model, guys, is a schema. It's a schema that you've written down and printed out on a piece of paper, and you're showing somebody and saying, hey, this is my model that we're going to use, that we're going to put into a database, but it is the definition of that model. Once we understood that, I mean, it's like, oh, okay, well, this makes sense. Because now what we have is we have a common data model for Dynamics 365. Shipments, forecast, service, support, all that kind of stuff, right? Then you've got another team in Microsoft that says, oh, you know what? We can use a lot of those concepts and we can standardize like calendars. Like what data do we need in calendars? Because Outlook uses all that information. So the Office 365 team defines all of their models that they need for it. Then we have got partner industry solutions that add to it. So healthcare. How does a patient record need to look like? What's the commonality in patients across Epic to finance, across all these different systems? And they've gone through then and documented that. So now that we have these concepts in place, that's great. We now have that model definition that's related to it, but how do we use that model? How do we interact with that model? How do we save data, validate relationships, enforce security, and do all those other things that are kind of like a database, right? Like a
Right.
SQL server, basically. That's what the common data service is then. And that's where the difference is. They're not the same. Common data model's definition. Common data service is where you store your data. It's where you put your data in an environment that takes that model information, creates those tables inside of the database, enforces those constraints or those relationships, and then allows you to save and update information in it. Right, Marcus? I mean, that's the way I've always looked at it.
Yeah, that's at its simplest form. Yeah, if you think about the database replacement as the service, but it's more than that. I think if you think about SQL Server, where you've got all sorts of other services that go with the data, that's what you're getting with the common data service as well.
And that's a really good point. So technically, when we look at it, Common Data Service is separated from Power Platform. Power Platform is where the Common Data Service and Common Data Model concept those started. You used to have to go to powerapps.com, and you still technically do. You go to powerplatform.com, right? To create an environment, basically. And that has been confusing because people are like, well, the Common Data Service requires Power BI, Power Apps, and Microsoft Flow. And that's really not the case. Dynamics 365 is saving information into the common data service. If we look at CE, for example, and Adam can probably correct us a little bit more with this, but CE, a lot of those entities or all those entities are actually built inside of the common data service, right?
Yeah,
when they
I think
create
they
a
all are
CE,
now.
yeah, they all are. And
Yep.
when we start looking at finance and supply chain management, the people are like, prove it, it's not there yet. We're starting to see an adoption of data that's getting into the common data service, either through the data integrator, and we've had prospects that we've talked to with this, or even potentially with the dual write capabilities that are being added to the product, that technically went live this last quarter, or this last wave release, is now they have the dual write capabilities. And so we're trying to, what we're trying to be very cautious with, though, too, is that obviously in the sales process, the worst thing that can be said to a prospect or even to an existing customer that's making a business decision off of it is that this is fully baked. Because I think, Marcus, from our perspective, it's not fully baked yet, right?
I would agree with that.
We've gone through what I'd say the zero iteration or the alpha with it, and we're moving now into the beta concept with this. But the adoption rate is starting to really skyrocket in my mind. I'm hearing more and more about this as we go through this.
Well, and it's at a place that you can actually build usable examples of how this can be leveraged into a system.
Yeah.
And I think we're looking at the spring. So you've got dual write capabilities with finance and supply chain management.
Yep, correct.
With a limited number of entities at this point, correct?
Yeah, 50 some entities, I think, is what they said publicly at this point. And that's where we're getting we're trying to get instances up and running to test that and validate that information too, because it's becoming much more prominent that customers want to see, hey, in a demo, when you create an account, make it show up inside of CE. So and they're going to keep on releasing and refining that, is what they've publicly stated at this point as well.
Okay. So I've moved data into the common data service out of BC. So it's not necessarily a native dual write capabilities yet, but I know there's some things on the roadmap for spring with the April release that are going to include that for Business Central.
Yeah, there's a gentleman. His name is Henrik. I don't remember his last name right offhand. The only reason I remember that, Henrik Helgeson. If you were ever on this stream, you need to say something in chat. He's one of my old mentors with the NAV solution that worked with me at a very large hearing aid implementation. And but anyways, that's how I remember his name. The point is that they're adding functionality into Business Central for that CDS integration. Right now, we've got an integration that's kind of an older direct integration, right, for the integration with Dynamics 365 for sales.
That's correct.
And they've been talking about CDS. It didn't make it to the Wave 2 release because of the other priorities that the BC team had. But from what's been stated, they're picking it back up, and we're looking at in Business Central, for example, there's ways then that you can use extensions, is what they're concepting with this, to connect to the common data service. So I don't know what that means explicitly at this point, but if you think about it, our tables in the NAV product and in BC, when you design those, you could actually say it's a CRM table. I don't know if they're going to do the same thing to say there's a CDS table, for example, that it can connect to. So we'll see what they mean by that. But it does mean that they're adding it, and that dual write concept where, and what dual write is, we keep on saying it, I apologize. When you save it in one system, it saves it in the other system as well. Like it's integrated into CDS, so once you add that or once you write to that account, for example, or that customer inside of finance or supply chain management, when you save that, it goes and saves that inside of CDS, so it's writing to the finance and operations environment or finance and supply chain, and it's writing then to the common data service at the same time. So you don't have that performance overhead or hit with it theoretically, and also you don't have to use the data integrator to copy that information back and forth.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's also, in terms of implementation, one less moving part. So I don't have a third party service running that's keeping these systems in sync that goes down, it breaks, whatever can happen with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've got here, I'm going to show, guys, if you've got YouTube, I'm assuming you know the YouTube, you can go to the YouTube and get information. This is in June that they demoed this with a finance and operations preview with it, and they show the setup of the link with this. And this is, like I said, this was in preview back in the day, and it's been released as general availability for it. This is a great video to look through to understand that concept, because they actually show the mapping of the table, they show the selection of fields, they show how it synchronizes, how if one environment is being upgraded, for example, how it can queue up the transactions that need to apply towards it, and then they apply to the instance when it comes back up. They show what happens like if there's a downlink and there's an error message that's related to it, and they also then start talking about what they're looking at adding in the future for this. So if you've not seen this video, just go to YouTube and type in dual write, and the very first one that shows up inside of here, I'd really recommend to review as part of it, because this is what we've been trying to get to with the data integrator, but because of the dependencies. An example is you set up a release product and you don't have the right item model group for some reason inside of the system. Well, it didn't do dependencies correctly as it inserted that record into the common data service, and so you'd have error messages then that would happen, and customers really struggled with that. So this is where we're getting more native into CDS on finance and supply chain management. And then Marcus, I know, like we said, Business Central, the same story is being asked of them as well as they go through this process.
Yeah, and I think what they're using is actually the same technology that they're cutting their teeth on with finance and supply chain management, that's now going to just translate to Business Central.
Absolutely. I mean,
which is just great for Business Central users.
They talk about it. It's a plugin architecture. That video actually talks about CDS has a plugin architecture inside of it as well, so that other plugins can be added. And we're going to kind of show that today as we go through this, where we can access this data through Power BI and through other areas as we go through this processing. So let's keep moving here, because I know time-wise I want to give you guys as much as possible. Common data service. Okay, so obviously we know what CDM is, we know what CDS is. This is what we look at then with the common data service, right? So not only does the common data service connect to Project Yammer and all these other productivity environments or applications, but it also connects to all the business apps inside of Dynamics 365. And here's the big one right here. The machine learning in my mind and then the analytics are something that are really important, right? I mean, that's where we start talking about this is the reporting requirement that we're getting off of this. This is where we've got different tools that are really centered around reporting, not third-party BI solutions that we're adding.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the big thing here, that you have to go through and set up a whole OLAP cube and do all this stuff. They're designing ways to take unstructured data that you can dump into a storage area from the common data service into a analytics storage area and then do reporting off of that data by using the more advanced unstructured type tools that they're building. Because, I mean, I don't know, Marcus, I've gone through an OLAP implementation, and OLAP means BI. Where
Yeah,
you
it's painful.
define metrics, measures, and you're like, so if I don't
Yeah.
define that metric or measure, and I have an employee come up to me and say, hey, I need this measurement or I need this value, I'm just like, well, I've got to update the model to handle that. We can't do that. That's problematic for customers, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
expensive.
and it's not as easy as it sounds just to update the model.
Yeah, no, it's
Yeah.
wonderfully easy. What are you talking about? I got to update my SSIS integration packages so that when they're doing the data pump, it's going through and consolidating those. And now I've got unique records versus, multiple records. It's just, yeah, you're right. It's not fun. So, I mean, that's the intent of this. Yep, go ahead, sorry.
I think the other thing to point out in this, in the really looking at the common data service, is how we think about reporting. And I think a lot of people, in a traditional sense, think about reporting like an aging, right? I'm gonna run a report. It's gonna be columnar data. It's gonna be text-based data, and I'm gonna print it and I'm gonna page through it. When you look at these productivity tools, so if you start with Power BI, Power BI is a data visualization tool. Yeah, you can run columnar type reports, but it's just not. It's not the best type of report if you're leveraging Power BI. So if you think about data visualization versus an aging report, you have to think about not only how am I presenting the data in a different way, but I think there's going to be some training with end users in terms of how do I actually take in this data in a different way.
Mhm.
There's Teams isn't listed there in productivity, but all of the Teams hooks have now been released with Power BI. So I can do an alert based on let's say a data element that changes in Business Central and post it to a team. So if it's a new product or if it's a customer that's I don't know, past due on a job budget or something
Inventory
like that.
shortage, right?
Yeah, really thinking about how do I notify people or tell people about something that's happening within my data set. It's a very different concept when you think about leveraging the productivity tools and really different reporting mechanisms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's so cool to see this type of integration. I mean, these are stories then too. We're talking about them right now. It's not just us that are doing these. These are customers that are like, oh, and we're going to show it in just a second here, is the concept of building a table to save data, to make a Power App that could save to it, to use Power BI then to report off of it. Like, we're not just talking about something that we have to go into a development environment and code complex integrations with it. We can just make the system automatically update our other systems. And quite frankly,
You're going to show us that, Scott, today?
Oh, well, not all of it, but some of it. Right? But Adam said, so he is going to show the Power Automate capability with this, right? And so I think that's pretty
weeks,
cool.
right?
Yeah, that's in 2 weeks, and so that's going to be a fun one. That's where with Automate we've got the robotic processing agent or robotic process agent.
Something like that.
But it's something like that. It's robotics where it can actually take a legacy application and it can fill out the fields based off of rules that you define. So that way, an example would be if you have an old Win32 or an old application, it's a desktop app, it can, like our task recorder that we have, it can fill out that data and save it inside of that system. And they showed, I think we did it at the Ignite one, right? Is that what it was that they showed
That's
that?
where they showed a demo of it.
That was awesome. I mean, that was like, okay, now I can see where customers can start doing this.
Yep.
So just kind of the big thing too, the key takeaway obviously is that with CDM and CDS, we're really trying to get to that shared data concept between it. It's not going to be perfect. There are going to be entities that you're going to need to create. And the challenge that we have right now as a partner is, where do we create these entities now? Where do we start storing this information? Because, in finance and supply chain management, for example, it has its own environment that it's using to really have that data governance, and we have our rules around that. But at the same point, if we don't save to the common data service, for example, we can't use a lot of those types of reporting capabilities that are coming down the pike from Microsoft with it. So we're really starting to start thinking differently on how we can actually go to market with that. And so now that we have the data, that's where we get obviously into the Power Platform perspective here. And that's what we wanted to kind of show today. So if you have not set up an environment, a Power Platform environment, or even a common data service environment, we're going to show that today. We're going to go through what you would do for setup with that. And basically, we talked about this about 15-20 minutes before our broadcast. It's pretty dang easy on what you can do with this. So if you're not using it right now, if you're an existing customer and you have even older versions of Nav, you could start using this for some of these business process changes that you have, right, Marcus?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So there's connectors to not only the SaaS offerings, but on-prem SQL servers.
Yeah, so SQL Server, staging table concepts, things of that nature that you may have to create some code then to save the information back and forth between it, or even within AX 2012. But if you start learning these concepts right now, and this is what we're talking about internally, these concepts are what Microsoft is really pushing forward with as we go through this entire process. And one of the big slides, I'll just kind of see if I don't know if I can put this in reading view that we can see it. So data, right? Data is the most important thing that we have. So this is the old look and feel of it, right? So static reports that we would create, that's a really manual process. It's really reactive. These are our SSRS reports, right, that we run with it. If we start looking at the next step with this, they're interactive dashboards, right? This is Power BI, so to speak, as we go through and do our analytics with it. Predictions then, so this is the Cortana intelligence that we can start integrating with, that we can run different type of predictive analysis that's a different type of report. And then you start getting into recommendations and decision making. So this is machine learning and that type of stuff. I think we're here right now. We're trying to bridge this gap right here to understand predictions that we can give to our customers using common data sets. But the next level that Microsoft is working on for us that is going to be in Dynamics really is getting into this decision automation, right? This decision support through the machine learning capabilities.
Yep.
So are we ready, Marcus? Should we go through and show?
Well, you're driving, so I'm
driving. Okay, you're ready. I'm driving. This is going to be fun. The first rule of demos: everything's going to go wrong. The second rule of demos: if it goes wrong, just smile. It'll work out.
Right.
So first things first. So you're new. You don't have an actual environment yet at this point. So what we want to do is we want to go through and create a new common data service environment. So if I remember correctly, Marcus, there's, the confusion is that it's actually on Power Platform, right? So you have to go to portal.powerplatform.com, or admin, sorry, .powerplatform.com to be able to get to this, right? So we're going to go ahead and make sure I can spell correctly.
I don't know. I linked to it off of my Office 365 waffle.
Okay, you can click on the waffle.
There you go.
click on your waffle.
Yeah.
All right, so here we've got our environments, right? So up at the top here. And so this is the funny thing. One time we did a internal training. I think I've said this on stream before. Do you remember this, Marcus? When we did the quarterly meeting and everyone created an environment?
Oh, yes.
We had over 120 environments because we had some Power App training that we did for the entire company. It was the coolest thing ever, but it was just a lot of environments that were set up. So when you go into your Power Platform, the admin.powerplatform.com, you can see we've got a bunch of different types of environments that are inside of here. Beforehand, I created one because, in a demo, the worst thing that can happen is that, it doesn't work for the demonstration. And so we've got a Stoneridge software trial environment that we created to be able to access that. But there are a couple of options that you have with this. One would be when you click on new for the creation of it on the far right here for our new environment, we have different types of environments that can be added. Now, a production environment, obviously, there's some billing event that occurs with it, and because we're pre-sales developer type people, we don't usually create production environments because that would probably cause a couple problems. So trial is typically the one that we use then to even show some of these concepts as we go through it. So if I say, for example, I'm going to call this the Confab dev environment, and I'm going to say it's a trial environment, and so this is for a demo. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a database then for this Power Platform environment. And that database is really the common data service. And you can see right here that it's documenting, it's not the common data model, it's the common data service that we're creating, or a common data service database. You could create an environment in Power Platform and never use the common data service. You just use that environment to connect directly then to applications, because there are connectors then on Power Platform that allow you to integrate with that. But what we want is we want a centralized data repository, so we obviously want to create that database that's going to do that. And when we click on next to this, here's where some customers are like, well, wait a second, I really want to have an account table, or I really want to have these other tables that are set up with it. And you can see I can't check mark the enablement of the Dynamics 365 applications. So an example would be in the common data model, there's a definition on different types of entities and tables, right? That's what we're talking about. So there are a couple of entities that are part of the common data model, like account, I think, might be one of them that is a global one, right?
Yep.
Whereas when you have Dynamics 365 for sales, they define the common data model for leads. And so if you create a common data service database and you don't have a Dynamics 365 application in there, you're not going to be able to create that, what they call a protected entity. You have to have Dynamics 365 for sales, because they're the owner of that definition of that lead table. They own that and work with all the other teams to add those fields to it. Now you could go off script and create your own lead table then if you wanted to, but you're not conforming with the common data model then with that, which means that if there's another application developer out there that wants to create something, they have no idea about your table that exists. So typically what our customers are doing is that they're going through and they're going and creating trial environments, not only through the Power Platform, but they'll go to trials.dynamics.com right here and then create this type of a trial environment. And the process is really similar to what we're doing here in the Power Platform. I'd go and say I want to create a new sales environment basically, and I'd click on that. I'd put my email address information in here. The music going crazy in the background. Put my phone number. I've never had anybody from Microsoft call me yet, so I think you're safe. No need to sign up, as you can see here, so we can go ahead and create that. And I've got some environments that are inside of here that you could join for an existing one, or you can create your own trial if you wanted to as part of this. And when you create that new trial, you can define what that name is. So if I create new trial, I can say it's a sales trial. I can change the name of it. And what happens then is if I go back into my Power Platform Admin Center here, you're going to see that environment then pop up. So this is the one I created as part of that. But this common data service database or environment or the common data service database that's in this environment has now all these additional entities that are inside of it. So Marcus, I think this is commonly how you actually spin up your environment as well, as you go to that trial, or do you go directly in here?
No, both, and Business Central does the same thing. So it's empty, because you don't have any objects in there yet. But yeah, it's a very similar way to go about.
Okay, so once we've set that up right now, we can start looking at the entities that are involved with that. And I think that's the confusion right here, is you're looking at this admin center and you're like, well, wait, I wanna go into the entities, right? How do I go into the entities, right? And you can't really from here, right? If I remember correctly.
Yep.
So you've got to go to Power Apps to do that, right? Because that's where you're manipulating that data entity or that model with it. Yep. So create from Power Platform, go into Power Apps. So it's going to be www.powerapps.com. Go ahead and sign in. And then on the top right up here, we've got our environments, right? And so if you remember, that environment was our Stoneridge software environment, Stoneridge software right here, is the environment that we have for it. You can see it's that trial environment. So now when I'm doing any of my Power App development, I'm inside of this environment. And in this environment, because I have a database, if I go to data, for example, if I go to my entities, this is now where I can then interact with those entities, right? You can see the type is here as well. And this is the important aspect of this, is identifying what those types are and whether or not you can customize it as you go through that. So you can see we've got a bunch inside of here, and we can go to different data flows, we can go to connections. You know, Marcus, is this typically how you are going through and accessing this as well?
Yep, and exactly the same way. I think there's just confusion because you have to go to the Power Apps interface to get to these entities, and that's just what causes confusion.
Okay, and that makes sense. And one thing I changed real quick here, so initially it had the default. So these are, for example, if I created a common data service database on the Power Platform where we were here, right, we would see only these tables. So I think that's the type of standard, basically, is the tables that it creates for it. It's your contact, email, mailbox. If you need to create an application that just uses these tables, you don't need to use the Dynamics 365 product then to create the other tables. But if you go ahead and you go to your type, or excuse me, you go to your view here, and you show all of them then at this point. So these are then all the other entities as well, with some of them that are actually managed as well. And so
there's a lot of them.
Yeah, you can see because I selected that one, we have now a bunch of additional areas or different tables or schemas that we can interact with. So invoices, and you can see, I believe right here, where it was created from as part of that. So, like I said, a lot of the first confusion I had going into here too was like, well, where's my invoices? Where's my orders? Where's my purchase orders? Where's all this information that the Common Data Service says that they've defined, but I don't have it? You need to make sure that you use the Dynamics 365 trial environment to create those entities. In a production environment, basically you would have licensing then for your production environment that says that you have Dynamics 365 for sales or CE or field service. And once you have those common data entities are then added into this common data service.
Yep.
So, and look at that. They even have the expert to data lake now in here. That is just awesome.
Well, I think some of those, when you use the trial versions, you get preview features as well.
Okay.
That's one of them that shows up.
Yeah, because I haven't seen that in the production one. So,
right,
and this gets into that AI story with it. So let's just say, okay, we want to create a patient table. So we're going to go off script a little bit here and create
just
a
one
new
second
entity.
Here, though.
Yeah.
I think just taking in the number of entities here is something to pause on. So you can see the amount of work by looking at how many entities are here, the amount of work that Microsoft has already done with the common data model.
Yeah,
it's certainly being developed.
Let's look at a purchase order, right? I mean, so the header information, who it's shipping to, the street address information, the vendor information. It's a lookup as well, which means it's a relationship to a vendor number. So they've got a vendor table that's inside of here. Now, you know, it's common schema, right? I mean, it's something that we can design one application around, or even one integration strategy, right? Because I mean, that's where we start talking about this a little bit differently in terms of, just imagine if you're an ISV and you need to create a purchase order system or something of that nature, but you need to make sure when that purchase order gets inserted that it synchronizes to 6 different applications. Well, if you did it into the common data service, then those applications are going to see it right away, right?
Yeah, that is the power. It's the ease of development. It's the speed to deployment. All those things is what we're looking at right here.
It's the reporting. I mean, everything. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back real quick here. So I'm going to go into my entities, and we're just going to create a new entity with this. So I'm going to call this the Stoneridge software. I just got the habit of putting a prefix with it. We'll call it a patient table, right? And our primary key is going to be number. So we want patient numbers that are going to be added. And then we're going to go ahead and create that entity. And look at that, we've got an entity inside of here. I already don't like this. It's not a text field, obviously. A number should probably be a number field. So I'm going to click on my number, and I'm going to go, oh, you know what? This is going to be an auto number. And I can say what's the beginning value and what's the number of digits that we have here. Maybe a customer number needs to be 10 digits, or maybe it needs to be 3,000 digits, or, you know, That's probably not good. Maybe it's going to be, maybe it's 30 characters, right? I've gotten that request before. I need a 30-character customer number or something like that. So you can go through and kind of define then what that standard is going to be. So here we've got 5, and I'll actually do 4 to keep the seed value correct. This was kind of cool that I saw inside of here too, putting descriptions around that. So we've got some documentation around that field, creating that field as well. And you can see in the background here, it looks like it added a bunch of different values basically to it as well, like created by, created on, modified by. So when I created that table, all these basics that you get in terms of who modified this, what date did they modify it at, who's the owner of it, what business unit owns this. So like multiple legal entities, do you have ownership across that? It seems to add a bunch of these types of values to the table that then track, probably with triggers, that data, right, that's occurring in the background.
Yep, absolutely. And I think the key here is you created an entity name and you created a primary key, and the Power Platform created everything else.
Yeah, so that's awesome. So I can save that. We're not going to even do relationships and business rules and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, this is more, but let's just say we just want to enter in patient information for this. So could I create an app, do you think, to do this? We've not done this.
I know you can.
Can we? Can I create a Canvas
we're
app?
going to go off script.
This is totally off script now. This is more fun.
Yes, we can.
So can I go ahead and start with my data? We'll do a phone layout, so we'll do a phone app with it. So is my environment focused on here? Provides access to it.
There you go.
Because, I mean, think about it. If I'm an end user here, this should be what we're testing. We're talking about this being an end user type activity, right? So do I have my SSI page? Oh my god.
Yep, I see it. Look at right there.
No way. Did I pluralize it too again? I can't believe it. It's supposed to be patient. Each record is a single record. Okay, cool. So it's going to load this up and generate a form for me, right? Is that what happens here?
That is correct.
Okay, so I've got a detail and I have an edit screen that's inside of here as well. What happens when I play it? I don't have any patients. Okay, we're gonna just
create one.
1002. Oh, actually, right? It's supposed to be auto numbered though, isn't it? Okay, well, I created a record, right? I could have tons of other fields that are in here too. 1003. Look at that. I've got 3 patients. I can go to the details. Hey, that's actually created on, remember? So it does have those fields that are there. So if we escape off of this, can I actually go ahead and then add additional fields into here? I mean,
yep.
So
yep.
I can
edit fields.
Edit fields.
On the right.
Far right.
Up. Right there.
Go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's all the fields that were there by default, but any field that you would have added is going to show up there too.
Created by. Created by. Maybe it's not triggering correctly at this point. Okay. Well,
but
interesting.
You just created a Power App against a custom entity.
Yeah, and I created data inside of it as well, right?
Yep.
So that was pretty easy to go through and do. Okay, so can I report off of it now, do you think?
Absolutely.
Really? So maybe I should go to Power Platform and go to Power BI, and this is the Power BI desktop, right, that I downloaded and installed as well. So let's go ahead and grab
to start a new
data.
report, I think you want to be in the desktop.
Okay, okay. You could do it from the web interface, I'm assuming, as well, right, with this?
Yeah, I think you can, but this is easier.
It is, okay. So common data service we're going to connect to now as part of this. So what I can do is I can paste in then that URL that was registered for this, because what I can do in here, just so you guys know what that means, is that when I'm actually at the Power Platform area right here, I can open the environment, and when I open the environment, it's going to show me this URL up here. So all I did is I copied this URL right here, and basically I'm saying, you know, that's where I want you to connect for the common data service, because that's the endpoint for it. When I click on,
I'll just point out to everybody listening, that is the key to this thing, is to figure out how to get to that URL.
Yeah, Sabrina, you're absolutely right. I mean, we're trying to show how easy this is to go through and do the setup with it. So this one, SSI, for example, maybe it's the wrong environment as well that I have that set up with. But those entities then are exposed inside of here that I can actually go ahead and then add to it. So if I create that custom entity, basically, what I can do is I can go ahead then and save that and then see that information, right? And so I think I did what I did before. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
There it is. And I think maybe my Power App though might be in the wrong.
Yep.
No, look at that.
And there's your 2 records.
So that's interesting too. Why did it say patience in the interesting? Because it's a
Oh, is it
form-based
using
application. I think
there
it's
was a description. Did it
yeah,
did it
it might have
translate
used
your
patience. Yeah, exactly. Or it might be pluralized. So in the Business Central environment, the mentality is a single record or a table is called patient. Any form that's off of it, like a list, for example, then would be called patients. They pluralize it. So maybe that's what happened. We'll have to take a look at that. But here then, I'm going ahead and loading that data then into Power BI, and now I've got Power BI data that is reporting off of this, right?
Yep.
So if I want to go a step further than this, I could create a Power App. I could have data saved into the Power Platform, which is great, into the Common Data Service. I
Yep.
can create reports here then, so that way I can say, for example, I could just do a quick table and then say the customer number, the status code, or any of the values, right, that I want to see in here. I can add to that, right, and it will actually show up for it. So I can
Absolutely.
check mark them or just show that information. So that's great. That's a start there. So how do I make this then go to finance and supply chain management or Business Central?
Yeah, publish it. Top right.
Well, no, not that. Not this. But how do I, if I save that patient, maybe I want to create an account inside of Business Central or a customer.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so Power Automate would allow you to write back to, at this point, Business Central.
Okay, so if I go to Flow, so Power Automate, Flow, they still have not updated this yet. So in Flow though, then I could create a flow.
Yep.
Let's concept this, a new flow for an end user. So what we're saying now is that that's great. It's all in the common data service. I'm saving all this information inside of here, but I need it to get to my ERP system, or I need it to get somewhere else. When that record is added, I want to do something with it. So what I could do is I could create a flow, go to instant, and say, this is my patient flow, and I can skip the generation there. And I can say, hey, when something gets inserted into the common data service here, when a record is created,
there you
what
go.
I can do is I can select my environment that we just created, which was Stoneridge software. Where's that at? And I can even type to get to it, right? Of course, everything's named Stoneridge software. Imagine that. There we go. That's it. Select the entity. Right, so it knows the entity now that's inside of here as well. So SSI, is it patients? Okay.
Yep, there you go.
That's the
Look
name.
at that, it all shows up.
Yeah, and then I can go by organization potentially, and I can add a new step when it's created. Let's insert it into Business Central.
Business Central.
Okay, perfect. Oh, look at that. There's a little connector right there, or on-prem as well. Okay, create a record. So when it creates here, I want to create it inside of Business Central as well. And I want it to go into our, I think we have a demo company inside of this environment, right? So there it is, the demo company.
Yep, there you go.
And I want it to go into the accounts.
Nope, customer. Isn't accounts? Oh no, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, yep. So number-wise, I want the number that I had on here to go into there. And then display name, whatever. I can put some value inside of there as well, right? But basically, I can create that relationship with it, save it away, and now I've got a flow that I can now, as I should insert into Business Central, right?
Yep, absolutely. That is the GL accounts table, though, I think.
Oh, it is?
I'm looking at display name, category, subcategory.
Oh, are you?
Yeah.
Customer.
But customers. There you go, customer. And that'll change the link, and I just map it.
So if I had a patient one, I could probably do that as well then. I mean, so there's probably some other aspects for integration that need to be looked at with it. But so that's Business Central. But then I could also, I mean, let's just get rid of this real quick because I mean that's great. Business Central does that. What other things can I connect to? And I mean, it looks like it's like finance and supply chain management, right? So I think they call it FinOps, ironically. Nope, they don't. Finance and supply finance.
They're there. I don't know what they're called today.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's like, come on. Finance and operations. Okay. Interesting. Well, I had it before, so I don't know what's going on here. If they fin. There we go. Fin. We'll just do it. Fin and
Oh,
ops.
there you go.
Okay,
Yeah.
so here is delete a record, create a record, and fin ops.
Yep.
So same type of mentality then too here, right? So select the instance, and I've got a bunch of instances that are out here. As we do our demonstrations, we should have an SRF CDS integration here. There it is. And then what's the entity that I want to actually insert it into? So here are all the finance and operations entities that I can integrate with this. So if you think about it, let's say let's play devil's advocate here. Let's say CDS doesn't have the entity that you want to synchronize between it. You could just do a Power Automate flow to say when a record gets added into finance and operations that it goes to CDS.
Correct.
And then that application is there for the user experience. They do their modification to it. Then it has another flow that fires off that goes back into the finance and operations environment, or even
That's
Business
absolutely
Central, right?
That's absolutely right.
So this can all be done from a user perspective then as well.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and the key is you just need your URLs correct.
Yeah, Bronx, absolutely. We will be saving it. Sadly, we only get 14 days because we're not a partner yet. I don't know if we'll ever make it to partner status because we stream only once every 2 weeks, but absolutely. And we also are taking, Sabrina, if I remember correctly, we're taking these videos and posting them on YouTube as well, right? So that way we've got it in the future.
Yep. But
So,
the amazing thing here is to get data out of, let's say, Business Central, because that's the one I've experimented with. You create the custom entities. I can do a data transformation of data from Business Central into the common data service. From there, I can report on it with Power BI. I can create Power Apps to interact with my data. I can display Power BI reports on my Power App, and I can write back to Business Central if I wanted to.
and people are like, well, it's not there yet. It's like, absolutely it is. Look at this. I mean, I'm sure there's going to be challenges. We're in the pre-sales world and we don't, think about all the challenges, but we think about a lot of them because we want to represent what we sell, obviously, with this.
Yep.
Here's the thing. Like, even in a demo that I was at yesterday, I set this up beforehand, and this was actually, as you can see, has been firing off, basically. And what happened here is that this happened where a business event occurred. It would actually send an email. So in this situation, when a business event occurred from my demo environment, I have another step inside of here that parsed this, and then all of a sudden it sent an email notification to a bunch of different people as part of this, and it had all the fields that were there as well. So, I mean...
Well, you could post it to a team channel if you wanted to. That's all those custom connectors are there. You could post to Evernote. You could post to Dropbox.
Yeah, because there's more connectors than just that, right?
Yeah.
We look at our connectors that are inside of here. I mean, you could have it
post to
put
Twitter.
a plan. Like, let's say you're a big planner one. Yeah, you could have it go to Dynamics 365. Yeah, you could tweet a major opportunity that you win or post it on Facebook. I mean, some of these are like, yeah, I don't know about that. But one of our pre-sales architects at one point had it when Microsoft was posting articles, that it posted articles on his LinkedIn. So it was subscribed to a blog and it would then reference a link to it. I mean, so this goes beyond than just what we've been talking about with our small little subset of Dynamics 365. There's a lot of cool things that you can do to really integrate to make this really successful in your organization.
Yep.
So,
and look at that, successfully worked within an hour.
That's amazing. I mean, I was expecting a little more, hiccups as we went through it, but hey, that's the beauty of this, is that it is getting better and better every single time as we go through this.
Yep.
And we're
no broken windows.
No broken windows yet. No, nothing at all. So I think we're getting to time. We started on time today, guys. Hopefully our audio issues have been resolved. We're going to continue to work on that. Obviously, we don't have a huge budget for this in terms of super high-end condenser mics, which would be nice at some point, or super high-end cameras, or a studio to do this. So every time we connect, we need to do setup to be able to drive that. But I wanted to thank all of you for coming out today to be able to go through and take a look at some of these cool technologies that we have. And 2 weeks from now, I'm hoping, crossing our fingers, that we'll have a great demonstration of Power Automate that we can do that goes into more detail about this, to start bridging the gap between these connectors. What about applications that don't have connectors, meaning
Right.
apps that are on your local network that you want to populate with data. So you create a Power App, you save data into it, and when they hit submit, it has to create a work order, for example, inside of a old, archaic, non-web service enabled type application, and it just works. I mean,
Yep.
that's what we're hearing with it. So
Yep.
that's what
Completely doable today.
yeah, that's what we're planning on demoing, hopefully 2 weeks from now. So stay tuned. We'll make sure to keep updating it. But until then, thanks guys for joining, and have a great
Have a good afternoon.
good